flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, anyone for public comment? Rod, you got anything?
Yeah.
Okay. You wanna come up and state your name, even though I just did?
You, talked about recording your board meetings or your budget hearings.
Mm-hmm.
I suggest you keep doing it. I listen to them every week. I might not listen to the whole works, but I scan through what I wanna hear. And if you don't, I'm sure there will be a dozen people in here with recordings, so it'd be best if the county would have their recording instead of private people. Thanks.
Yep, thank you. Okay, anything else for public comment? Seeing none, I need a motion to approve the agenda and the meeting minutes from January 2nd.
I just need to make one comment. I found a mistake after I sent it to you on page 5 in new business in the 3rd paragraph. There's a typo. It says cased instead of ceased, so I did change that on the copy that Carter will sign. So
Okay,
that just for the minutes, that is the change for the minutes.
Okay, thank you. Anybody wanna make a motion to approve then? Motion by Stecker. Second by, Josh had his hand up first. Second by Wactor.
I think all three of you guys tied for seconds. I'd be jumped first though.
Yeah. Motion by Stecker, second by Wactor, to approve. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Discussion, budget review and approve claims, drainage claims. My computer's still restarting, so any questions on the claims? Okay. Any motions?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Garmin to approve claims. Second by Stecker. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Next up, we have the budget status report. Questions for Tammy on that? Otherwise, we'll let the record reflect we acknowledge the budget status report. Okay, and then we have, excuse me, we have discussion, decision, discontinue recording budget workshops.
Well, I was hoping more department heads would be in here this morning. Maybe they'll still join us, but we had talked about this at the last department head meeting, that several department heads would like just the budget workshops not to be recorded, so they could talk more freely about personnel, maybe things coming up this next year, and didn't feel like they were being watched over and over. They just thought it would be a more extensive conversation if they could be off camera.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned last week, this has come up twice already, just since I've been on the board. First time it did not pass, second time it did. Just to give the board a little bit of a refresher reasoning on why. Something in my throat. We had issues during budget time with certain, look at what happened with the libraries and economic development. That all kind of ties into some of those reasonings where the public didn't feel we were being transparent enough, wanted to have some insight on what was going on, had certain issues with board and employees that wanted, that the board then felt it was necessary to record them. That's why it got left that way. I understand the sentiment of not wanting to have everything on camera. I guess my question would be, for department heads, what are some of the matters, related matters, I guess, that would be concerns that needed to come before the board during a budget workshop that maybe, say, Howard and myself as chairman and vice chairman, if you pull us aside sometime and, or, I mean, I never really hear about these concerns as the chairman. Is that something that you need the whole board as far as an employee matter, or what are some of these concerns, I guess, I just wanna know that,
Well, if you're making decisions
Are you
on,
advocating for closed meetings then? Or, I mean, I would rather talk to the whole board
Right,
and not.
me too.
I'm not saying making decisions, I'm saying if you
I
haven't.
absolutely do not feel comfortable. If I wanna talk to the board about a certain situation that may or may not involve secondary road employees, or all employees for that matter, with health insurance, I don't wanna pull one board member and then have that board member, I'm assuming what you're recommending, that board member then go and talk to the rest of the board about something? I don't like that.
No, I'm not saying that,
Get it
I'm
all
just throwing out hypotheticals, Doug, I'm not saying.
No, I don't like that hypothetical, we'll just put
Okay,
it that way.
I'm asking for opinions, so.
No, that's fine.
We don't have to get worked up about it, it's just, I'm just asking, what are some of the concerns?
One of the concerns, I think you'll get more candid response from the department heads when they're not recorded, because they are talking about, specific employees, specific personnel, especially when you get to the salary aspect of it. And the other option would be every time you have a budget proposal, the department head said, well, I'm gonna go into closed session. Which you can do because you're talking about salaries.
So I think I've heard that concern a number of times, and I guess one, I'll say there are there are criteria for going into closed session. Someone's wage is not a closed session topic, and quite frankly, we can't give raises based on someone in the same job description doing excellent job versus someone else who's doing average or poor. That's not an option fundamentally for our raises, so I would disagree with that almost entirely. There are situations that could be in closed session about an employee's performance and things like that, those are specifically laid out in the code, but someone's wage does not fall into that category. I think I could count on one hand the number of conversations that have came up during budget discussions that I think would have even been in a gray area as far as whether you would want them to be broadcast, so I don't think that's a widespread thing that I have seen in my time on the board before, during, or after budget recordings being started. And I think it's difficult, if not impossible, for a member of the public who wants to be informed and be involved and know what's going on to fully understand the budget without having the ability to see the conversations of each point that gets to the finished product. Everybody can read line items on a piece of paper. We're not special as board members about that, department heads aren't special in that category, everybody can read numbers on a piece of paper. But the context and the discussion around those line items and the justifications of why, I guess quite frankly, I don't think as a board we should have to repeat those reasons over and over and over again. If there's people that are interested, I've encouraged them to watch the videos time and time again, or, okay, it was this date, it was probably halfway through the meeting, go find it and watch that one specific piece if you're concerned about it, or whatever. I have no problem giving a 30-second overview or a 30,000-foot view of a topic quick, but I can't spend hours repeating the exact same conversation we had multiple times. And I think for someone in the public to actually see the full context, they need to see that entire conversation or be able to. But there are pieces that could go into closed session, but not salary related. And yeah, performance would be, but, I mean, quite frankly, most performance things should be dealt with outside the boardroom unless an elected official would like or needs support from the board or wants to run something by us. I think there's a number of avenues to accomplish that. One of them would be a closed session with the entire board, but, from a financial perspective, as one of our major jobs is acting and deciding on things in the budget, I don't see performance of an individual employee making any significant piece of that conversation, I guess. Did you have some?
No, I thought a lot about it since we had the discussion, and honestly, even last year was thinking about it, cause it did feel like, maybe some people were not as comfortable. But I also feel like we have to face a reality that, our board meetings are recorded. The financial aspect of it is an open book. Everything that we are talking about is public record, as far as the budget goes, and, I guess I don't see any reason why a department head would not wanna openly discuss their budget. It speaks volumes to their department and how they are, handling their department, and they're elected, some are elected, some are not, and I feel like the people, have more trust in the elected officials and the department heads when they feel like we are being transparent. That has come up quite often where sometimes people just have the feel that we're trying to hide something, and I don't necessarily think that that is what it is. I think some people aren't necessarily as comfortable knowing that they're being recorded. But it's our reality, and the budget is a big piece of what we do. We run the rest of our year on this, and I mean, the more I thought about it, I honestly think we should still record them.
An interesting piece of information, I reached out to a few other supervisors just in the area to see what other counties doing for their budget workshops. The only county that I heard back from that did not was Humboldt, they just never have. But like Hancock and Winnebago, I heard back from both of them this morning even, then they said it was an open meeting, it's on their agenda, so they recorded. That's kind of their criteria of, if it's on the agenda, it's a public meeting, it's recorded. Otherwise, they felt they're picking and choosing between what public meeting do we record and what public meeting do we not, and how to justify that, so, which I understood that, but that's a few counties that, what they're doing.
Well, and quite frankly, I mean, if you're in here talking about your budget that you're presenting, I think there's a number of reasons that could be positive too. Like, you can talk about efficiencies in your department or things that have been either good for a long time or things that have changed, and kind of the culmination of that product. I see more benefit than harm to it if we get past the level of fear that, some people have talked about. There's a lot of opportunities to talk about things that are good, and I mean, there's certain things that ebb and flow financially from a cyclical perspective. I mean, like Tammy's budget with the elections is a great example. General elections, your costs are gonna be substantially more expensive than off years and on and on. I could talk about that to some degree, obviously just from being here for the time I have, but that's not my specialty, it's not my department. So Tammy's gonna be able to explain that much better than I would, and probably more thoroughly, probably in a way that resonates with people easier, I would think. So if you say, okay, this year's a general election, we need more locations, we need more staff, we need more training, yada yada yada, versus this year, you may have a substantial percentage increase at the bottom over the previous year that was an off year, but it's not really a concern or out of the normal. So I think some of those things that could potentially look alarming to people if you just flip through papers and look at line items and percentages and stuff like that, might be like, oh, why did the elections budget triple this year? Well, because it's that point in the cycle. And I think a lot of times there's simple explanations for stuff like that, but I do think, having that conversation be open and clear to anyone who wants to see the information is important, because some of those things can be easily explained in a positive way.
And they need to be explainable when there's big changes or, you know, they need to be explainable.
Josh or Howard, did you have any thoughts before I ask for motions?
Yeah, I won't say much because I'm still
Oh, okay.
recovering, but, I just can speak to, you know, previous years when we've had like the, you know, end of the budget cycle when we do the budget hearing. I know we've had this room filled with people asking tons and tons of questions. Well, last year that wasn't the case because our budget hearings were public. So people could, you know, review that and be like, oh, well, that's why that's, you know, so high. And then that saves them the time from having to come in and ask all those questions. I mean, so I feel like in a transparency aspect, that is really helpful for people to be able to, you know, yeah, oh, that's why that's, you know, so high and why that's been increasing. And that saves, you know, a lot of headache, a lot of stress, and people able to understand it a little bit better.
I make the comment that a year ago, I would have been strongly in favor of turning the camera off so people would speak more freely. I'd like to hear what they're really thinking. I'd say today, I'd be a 50-50, I could be convinced either way. But that being said, it's pretty obvious to me how we're gonna end up, so. And again, I don't feel strong. A year ago, I would have felt strongly about trying to get more. And I guess I wanted to make the point, we're talking two different things, it's not a closed session, it's just not recorded, so the public could still be here, but again, I'm either way, I'm not a thing for me.
I'd like to make a quick comment.
Sure.
So I have no problems being recorded, I'm out in the public all the time, we get open records requested all the time, so I have to follow chapter 22 on which records we can release and which records we cannot. My question for you as a board is, when I come in here to do budget workshops with you, would you prefer then that I request ahead of time that we can go into a closed session? Or would you prefer that I just don't discuss the liability side of my budget? Meaning that there are certain areas that I may need to address with you about, this is why I'm asking for this amount on the budget, because I want to protect the county from these liabilities. Something that I feel that should be discussed in closed session. So should I request that ahead of time, or do we just, because understanding that you have to post it ahead of time if you're gonna go into closed session? Or would you rather just not discuss it in a public meeting?
I think for different situations, we'd need to refer back to the code as to what would be covered.
That's why I'm asking that question, because you are required to post it ahead of time.
Yep.
I also think that any dollar amounts that are discussed in the budget are public. So a budget workshop is not a reason to go into closed session. I do not feel.
If you're discussing, budget concerns of where the money would come from to protect the county from certain liabilities, I think it should be in a closed session.
So.
There again, you might wanna seek the advice.
I would talk to Todd,
Right.
and I guess that's the first thing.
For example, you're talking about job performances and, we're talking about, you know, terminations or pending, situations that can happen or are gonna come up. Some of them may be directly related to a budget as if you're gonna talk about policy and procedures, maybe certain things that need to be updated or changed. And if you're gonna discuss that, you don't wanna do it in a setting that's gonna put the county in a liability.
I think you're right to be cautious on how that information is presented. I don't know that the budget time is the only time that should be discussed, so it could be discussed outside of budgets as well. But the first thing I would say for any closed session would be, I would say talk to Todd first, see his opinion on how or where that would fall into closed session criteria. And then handle it from there, because if he says, no, that really doesn't apply, then might have to look at other avenues to get that information to the board. But I don't think that it solely revolves around budget time, if that makes sense. I mean, there might be aspects
Well,
of
it's
your
budget related.
there might
If
be
there's,
aspects.
if there's no money there to fix a problem that you see as a department head as a liability issue, and there's no money there to fix it, that becomes a budget problem.
If you're looking for a significant increase over normal, I could see where
Correct.
that would need to be explained, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
That way I can.
yeah, I guess I would say
Discussion.
from Todd
Thanks, Scott. That's okay, I don't need it right now. I'll let you know it. Sorry, I mean. Yeah,
I don't think you missed too much there.
okay.
Any other discussion or comments on the topic?
Otherwise, I'll take a motion, but,
Do you have anything?
yeah, oh, yeah.
No, I was just gonna say mine, I'm used to being recorded every day. My concern isn't me being recorded, it's the personnel, it's my employees. Like, for example, this year, we're short-staffed and, we have an employee leaving, and so I wanna talk about, how I'm gonna handle that, how many deputies I'm gonna have, what I'm looking at in promoting somebody to deputy, and some of those conversations, I'd rather be able to talk to you freely about, not being recorded, to protect that employee. Not for me, but for that employee, so that's where I'm coming from. I just wanted to.
I guess I would kind of reiterate what I just said to Roger. I would talk to Todd and see what pieces of that conversation could.
I know it's not a closed session issue, I know that. I just wanted to let you know why I see
Yep.
the value in not recording.
Very good. Motion to any effect from the board? Agenda language is discussion decision to discontinue recording budget workshops, so it may be appropriate to
Just to have it on the record, I would make a motion to
continue.
continue budget workshop recordings.
Okay, motion to continue budget workshop recordings by Stecker. Is there a second to that? Okay, second by Wactor. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Yeah, I'll throw mine in there, yes,
You're an aye?
I'm opposed.
You're opposed,
Yeah,
okay,
Same side,
okay. Okay,
just for,
yep,
I don't feel strongly about it. but-
that's fine, 4-1, motion
You could
carries.
abstain if you don't wanna vote at all.
4-1, motion carries. Alright, thank you for the discussion. We are up to discussion decision, approve spending limit for Kossuth County Engineer. Good morning, Doug. This was put on the agenda last week. Last week, as when we were going through the regular business of the new year on spending limits of $5,000 per department head, and I know a couple years ago we took that away for your department just cause it wasn't practical to have a $5,000 spending limit for every little item that you buy, as it's a lot of items over $5,000, so we wanted to have a discussion with you. What did you feel was an appropriate, spending limit? What did the board feel was an appropriate spending limit? And just so something was in place for that. Because currently you're the only department that doesn't have anything, and that's why it's on the agenda, from what I gathered last week. Do you have any thoughts yourself on?
So is the board asking the question, what's the question again, I guess?
What,
The board supervisor?
similar to when you had a $5,000 threshold where something needs to come and be presented to the board as an expense.
Well, I guess I'll go ahead, I'll make a statement. I don't understand if the board approves a budget, why then would any department head be required to get permission to make an expenditure? The budget's approved, and whether it is law enforcement, another department, why would they, if they're working within their budget and they're not going over their budget, but why would they need approval? I'll ask that to the board of supervisors.
Has it always been that 5,000?
No, it's not.
No.
No.
That started, I believe, with a human resource employee purchasing something, and the board was upset with that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy.
That was before me.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You could be correct.
You are correct.
Oh.
You are correct, that did happen.
And that's what caused the whole issue, I believe.
Yeah.
I believe I remember that situation, but I think this was in place before that, and then the lack of approval was part of that issue there, if I remember correctly.
So the person was
There was an
The
issue to how that
employee
took
was
place.
spending out of their budget. Is that what you're saying?
No, and I don't think we should probably even discuss that because, that, yeah.
I'm not familiar.
Yeah, I was here,
It's
I
more-
remember it, I don't feel it needs to be discussed
Well,
in an open meeting, but I understand your question.
may I just make a point? These are the types of things when you just, the previous item that you just discussed, this is sometimes during budget activities, why it makes it more comfortable to speak about things when the recording is not going on. So I'll just say that.
Well, that, at that time was also a personnel issue, so that's why I'm uncomfortable speaking about that in an open session. It wasn't a budget issue, it was a personnel issue, and so I'm not comfortable bringing that up.
But the
Discuss it.
reason is because there was an employee that did something that
There
the
was a
board did
limit,
not.
I don't know
there
what
was
the,
a limit prior to that.
I don't know what the situation was, and that, I don't really care, but, I mean,
Doesn't matter.
that doesn't matter pertaining to the discussion on, are we gonna have a spending limit for the engineers department? I guess if you're not gonna have a spending limit for anybody to bring to the board if it's already built in their budget, that's a different discussion. It's just the engineers department happened to be the only department in Kossuth County that doesn't have a threshold. So, are we gonna set a threshold? That's the question. It's, yeah. Am I fixed?
Your password expired, so.
Oh,
we'll reset
okay.
it, so.
Thanks, Derek.
Yep.
I think looking at the normal expenditures over the years, I can understand why 5,000 would be a hard threshold for the secondary roads department. But I think with Doug being in here every week, I think there's things that can and should be brought to our attention and approved in a normal, easy process. I would say 25,000 would probably be a pretty reasonable limit. I mean, there's things like, I don't know, say motor grader blades that you might get 100 of them at a time and the total cost is more than that, but those wouldn't apply as multiple items. So when we fix a roof on a shop for 50,000, I think we could have that approved before it's actually contracted. Or buying a new piece of equipment, I think that's typically the standard ones that are brought in, and those are well above that dollar figure. But I don't know anything off the top of my head that would exceed 25,000 that couldn't normally routinely be discussed with the board on a weekly basis, so. I guess that's food for thought for everybody.
Have you ever had a spending limit?
Not that I'm aware of. I will say there are situations that happen. For example, this year when we were crushing gravel, the crusher, the people that were crushing encountered a large volume of clay. Underneath of that clay was still good gravel. I have no idea what the cost is gonna be because it's difficult to get a volume of clay when it's all underground. So, are you expecting the county engineer to come in if it's discovered on a Tuesday afternoon and stop the construction or stop the operation and wait for the board to approve of that? And what difference does it make if a shop needs a roof and it costs money? Is the board not going to approve that? Is the board, if something happens, there's always a situation that happens.
I think that the engineer's office, the secondary road department is kind of unique in the situation that things come up, and I don't think we as a board need to micromanage how he does his job. And I don't think that we should expect him to, stop an operation that should be continuing because he needs to get a repair on something or whatever it is for a spending limit, and then we stop business. I mean, we all know what happened when there were certain things that we didn't do. We filled a room, people were upset. I don't wanna stop that progress. I feel like, I don't understand why we wanted it on the agenda to begin with, but I am the one who suggested it because it was asked last week if we were gonna set a spending limit for you, Doug, and I said, Doug is not up here, he should be here. So I am probably the reason why it got added to the agenda, not because I necessarily wanted that spending limit, but I felt you needed to be here and be forewarned it was being discussed. I don't feel like we should stop business, especially in the secondary road department. We wouldn't expect Roger, if he has a vehicle, to just completely blow up and he needs another vehicle, we're just gonna say, sorry, your deputy, he can't work for a week because he doesn't have a vehicle. I mean, that's not the intention of any of this, so I don't necessarily feel it's necessary, and you've always been within your budget. You're not putting us ever in a bad position, so I feel like we have an engineer that makes good decisions.
I'd like to throw out another example. In May of 2024, we had a rather large situation develop after a flood where a road and a large pipe actually was washed out, and people did not have access to their property. Now, as soon as I knew the pipe was gone and it needed to be replaced, I ordered a new pipe to put in there. I didn't wait for some sort of disaster. I said, we're gotta go do this. We made temporary repairs, but it was well over $30,000, and the whole project was well over $80,000. I mean, is the board questioning some decision like that?
I think when we removed the engineer's office from the $5,000 threshold, not that that was ever practical to meet in the first place, but we had asked you to make as best effort as you can to inform the board as you go along with more major things, and I think, I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I think that has improved over the last couple of years. I think you've done a fair job. When I look at the claims, and example, you were, the last few weeks, talked about the overhead door at the transfer station being damaged in the process there. I mean, I think you are bringing some of that stuff to the board and being transparent in that way, so I appreciate that. And I think that's exactly what the board had asked a couple of years ago. It's just my opinion, but things have improved, that's all of my point.
I'm gonna comment, experience is supposed to be something, on a board, on the elevator boards where I was on, we had a limit. It's a little different, with the departments weren't segregated as much as they are here in different situations. We had a limit, and if it was and I'm not advocating for anything, I'm just telling you what we did there. We had a limit, and if it was an emergency, and it happened, in that situation, the general manager was supposed to call the executive board. I don't know if that was 2 or 3 people out of a 9-person board, and they could get approval pretty darn quick. I only bring that up, I don't want that, that's just something we did on that board.
What was your system, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, we have something similar at CIJDC, we have a threshold for the associate directors, we have a threshold for the executive director, we have a threshold for the board chair, and a threshold for the executive committee, and then anything above that would have to come to the full board, so it's kind of tiered like that.
We can't hear anything like that here.
No, but,
It's different. I mean, we are government, we can't hear it like that here.
but yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Amber, nobody's intent, I don't think anybody's intent is to stop everyday operations or emergencies, or, I don't think anybody would question that or be opposed to that kind of stuff.
No, and I think that's why Doug's on the agenda every single week. You know, he
Right.
is on the agenda every single week, and it's always discussion.
No
with
other
the
department
engineer and the, yeah, and the other
Other
departments
than
aren't.
Tammy, you're on the agenda.
Well, yeah, and so, you know, that's his time to inform the board, and I feel like he does inform us about everything that's going on.
I guess while we were having this conversation, I looked back and I found in the meeting packet for 2018, there was a discussion about approval to pay a bill for, it was actually from Steve Golash for law enforcement vehicles, and then under that it said number 2, discussion about a $5,000 spending limit, and there's a couple invoices here, but the first invoice was $6,800, and I mean, without digging back into the weeds, I would imagine that, I mean, there's a couple of them, but none of them are super significant, and I guess, I think there's a way to put a reasonable limit on things that, anything above that just gets simple approval. I don't think it's about not doing X, Y, Z things, I think it's about just having that chain of command and that structure there, which everybody else has had for at least the time that I've been on the board.
I think too, you can take it to another level, as I remember back when I was the auditor and there was departments that now I think handled a little bit differently. I don't know what IT has as far as equipment and who, but anyway, when it was back to when the auditor's office would buy their own copy or whatever, if we knew we were going to budget for that, it was in our budget, we put excess in our budget, it was explainable. That's still, so that is kind of the point of, that's the approval. The sheriff say he's gonna do 4 new vehicles this year, and he tells us in his budget, that really, all honesty, is the approval, we're approving that, but for him, it's like, it's not gonna stop business, he's still gonna go about whatever, but for Doug, I mean, that can change a lot of things. I mean, he has day-to-day operations that we shouldn't expect him to call. And I don't, I'm just gonna say, I don't feel like he has ever done a poor job managing his budget dollars. And so I'd rather see things just stay the same so that we can always continue business, so our taxpayers are happy with their roads and their ditches and everything else that goes along with Doug as the engineer.
Good discussion.
And I think the biggest thing about it is just the transparency factor, and I think, I mean, it's not like someone's gonna come in here, we're gonna disallow them an expense over 5,000 for, you know, whatever reason. I think the biggest key is just the transparency of it. And as long as the transparency stays, that's not a huge issue.
So if we record budget workshops and people watch that, do you feel there's I'm just asking, do you feel there's a gap in transparency when people can see that, or we can point them back to a workshop, say this is why this expenditure was done, versus then having it come up again throughout the year? What's your
Well, I
opinion
think
on that?
because, you know, we approved budget early on in the year, and say we get to October, and there's an expense that was planned, but, you know,
Everybody
has been
forgot by
discussed
October?
for, you know, how many months, it's a good thing that they come in and just do that approval, just for transparency reasons, you know.
No, I'll be honest, I forget that we're gonna buy something too.
Yeah.
You can go through so many different things I can see what you're saying.
Well, and even, I mean, we have things as simple and I guess obvious as our solution software, and I mean, it's not like we're not going to do it if that's the best route for the county, but it still gets put on the agenda and we approve it, and it was obviously discussed during budget and it's factored in there, but we have dozens, if not hundreds of examples in the course of a year of things that were included in the budget for numbers' sake and were discussed and still get a specific item on our agenda, we discuss it, we approve it, and move forward. I don't think it has anything to do with stopping day-to-day business to have things specifically approved over a certain threshold.
And there's times too where things that aren't discussed in the budget, they come out throughout the year, equipment breaks down,